I've finally gotten the coloring video done. However, it's a bit different than I wanted it to be. It's gonna be in 2 parts, hopefully. I hope I don't have to do 3 parts. I might have to cut out some of the footage in order just to make it 2 parts, because I have about 9 hours of footage that I've had to speed up. But the program that I'm using, Kdenlive through Linux, it can't render videos that are sped up more than 500%. So I have had to cut the coloring video in 2 parts. So this first part is going to be the rocks and the grass, I believe, and hopefully the next video will be me finishing it. If I cut out some footage. I really didn't want to do 2 parts. I would have wanted to do 1 part, but like I said, I'm limited by technology, so this is what I have for this week, and next week will be part 2. And I promise it will be part 2. It won't be some random thing, even though I'm very good at doing random things. And I guess we should just hop right in. Okay, so first things first, a little while ago I was having some confusion deciding what to name my plants. I wanted to give them names because if I give them names, I'll take better care of them. And I can say for certain that the plant that's growing by my desk, the pothos plant, the one that is also nicknamed the Devil's Ivy, his name is now Lucifer. I've decided it's Lucifer. He looks like a Lucifer to me, and it's just funny that the nickname is Devil's Ivy, so Lucifer it is. As far as the tropical plant goes by the window, I'm thinking Theodore, but I'm not sold entirely on it because I think I've had a Theodore before, and I don't like to have plants with the same name again. I like to have them be different names, but I've had so many plants that I just don't remember if I've had a Theodore. I don't think I have, but until I'm certain of it, he's just tentatively named that. The catnip that I had in here was taking up so much room and not growing and being a pain in the ass, so I put it back outside, and we're gonna see if it can fare the weather better out there than it can in here, because it was just annoying and it was in my way, and I just had stuff that I needed to put on surfaces, and it was taking up a lot of space that I needed for something else. So that is gone and not a problem anymore. And then the neon pothos I have by my bed, I think I'm gonna name Peter. Right now I'm reading a series of young adult books, the Peter and the Starcatcher series. I'll put up a picture here because I can't remember the author's names exactly. I think it's Barry Peterson and something Ridley. I don't know. I'm gonna put a picture up here of the books. I'm on the last one, The Sword of Mercy, and whenever I read it and I look over at this very, very, very bright green plant, I just think Peter. So Peter is his name now. I feel comfortable with that. So Lucifer and Peter are set. Theodore may or may not be what that name ends up being. The second thing I wanted to talk about was just how long this video actually is and why it took so long to edit. The video footage was 7 or 8 hours long when it was all put together, and in these sped up videos where I talk over them, I speed the footage up 500%. In this case, in order to hit it under 30 minutes, I had to speed it up 900%. So no, I do not color that fast. Not that fast at all. But I needed to get this video all done in under an hour, preferably under 30 minutes, because I know my attention span leaves after about that amount of time, and I didn't want to subject other people to that as well. It sped up a lot. So now I'm done with excuses about why this has been taking forever to get done, and I wanted to go into the next story. Here we are, and here we go. So to be 100% transparent, I recently went to the mental hospital for the 4th time. Yes, it was my 4th time going, so that is that. I've had many experiences with the mental hospital, and if people have questions about that, I am more than willing to answer them or even make a video about them. But this last time that I was there was a bit different than my other experiences. In this experience, I was in the emergency room for 24 hours before being admitted into the actual mental hospital itself. I had to go to the ER because I had some stitches that needed to be put in, and after they were done, they said, "We're gonna send you a social worker and you guys can talk." And this always happens. So the social worker comes in and we talk and we discuss why we're there and all that fun jazz. And then they say, well, we want to send you to the mental hospital. Will you go voluntarily or involuntarily? And I really didn't want to go. I really wanted to stick my heels into the dirt and say, no, I don't want to go, because I didn't want to go. It was my 4th time. I wanted to go home. I wanted to work on videos. I wanted to do art. I didn't want to be there again. But I said voluntarily. I will go voluntarily. involuntarily, because involuntarily means you're going to be put on hold there. And then you don't have any input whatsoever from when you leave. It's all about the doctor's ideas, all about the nurses, and all like the DA and the courts and stuff like that. And it takes a really long time to get out. And you can't say to them, hey, I'm ready, because they won't believe you because you're there on hold. So knowing this, I decided to say, all right, I will go voluntarily. And so I did. However, the mental hospital only has so many beds for so many people. And with COVID, there's been a rise in how many people have gone to the mental hospital. And so they didn't have a bed for me. And they wouldn't have a bed until 24 hours later. And since I was in the hospital for mental health reasons, I was not allowed to go home in that time. So I had to stay in the ER. I had to sleep there overnight and everything. I had to eat the interesting hospital food and everything too. I'll mention that in a minute. But I had to stay. And I don't know how many of you have been to the ER for a while, but what they do is they take your clothes and they give you paper scrubs. Or maybe this is just for mental health people, but they take your clothes and they give you these blue paper scrubs, or at least they were blue in my experience, and they're paper, so they're kind of shit is the nice way to put them. And the size that they gave me was an extra small top and an extra small bottom, which would have been fine if I hadn't moved, if I didn't sit down, if I didn't stand up, if I didn't walk, if I just stood. Those extra small pants would have been fine. But for 24 hours, you just don't stand still. Especially for me, I did a lot of pacing because I was very anxious about being there for so long and I wanted to go home, I wanted to get out, and I was just in general discomfort. So I'm wearing these extra small paper pants, and after, I would say maybe 10 minutes, they rip right down the middle. Because of course they did, because I sat down. And so my underwear was on full display. And in my unbiased opinion, my underwear is very cute. At least I didn't have the mortification of wearing like really gross, holey, or stained underwear. They were pretty cute, but once again, that's my unbiased opinion. So I'm there basically with assless paper chaps on. And I also had a sitter, which was someone who sat outside of my room and could look in and watch me, and had to watch me for the 24 hours that I was there. I had a couple sitters just to make sure I didn't hurt myself, basically to make sure that I was safe and that I wasn't going to dig up my stitches and whatnot. And so I did a lot of pacing, so I'm pretty sure those nurses that had to sit for me got a good view of my underwear a lot of the time. And I mean, I tried to pull down the shirt to cover up the fact that I was wearing chaps without an ass, but it was an extra small shirt, so it only went down so far. So I'm pretty sure people noticed. And I said to them, I said, hey, you know, these pants, they're split. Can I get a bigger size? Oh, sure, 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 they would say. An hour later, I'd mention it again, and they'd say, sure, sure. Well, after about the 4th time that I asked, I just gave up, because I wasn't allowed outside of the room anyway, unless I had to use the bathroom. And the nurse I was watching would come with me and stand outside the door. And by this time, she's pretty much seen every aspect of my underwear, so what's the point of even hiding it anymore? So I did a lot of pacing with my paper leggings on, and they finally bring food, and they bring it on these disposable styrofoam trays. And so I ate the food. I don't remember what I ate. It wasn't very filling or appetizing. I remember that much. And I drew on the tray by pressing the edge of the spoon into the styrofoam and scratching lines in. And an hour later, they came back for the tray. They saw that I had scratched lines into it, and they were flabbergasted by that idea. And they said, oh my goodness, you've drawn on the tray. How interesting. Hey, come look at this. Hey, look at this. And they would show my tray around to all the other nurses. And I was a bit mortified with that. I was not very comfortable, to be honest, but I didn't really have much of a choice, kind of like I didn't have much of a choice to have a nice big breeze on my butthole all the time. So I just admitted to it. I said yes. And then they did something that I am eternally grateful for. They said, would you like paper and a pencil? And I said, yes, of course, I would love paper and a pencil. When you're in the mental hospital, they don't give you pencils. They'll give you paper, but they do not give you pencils because they are too dangerous. There's some patients there that just can't be trusted with those utensils. I personally have never seen a pencil as anything but a tool of creation. The idea of hurting myself with a pencil is, for lack of a better word, blasphemous in a way. So I was elated when they gave me a paper and pencil, and I spent a while drawing fish, because that's all I could think about was just drawing fish. And I was able to keep my fish. They didn't take them or anything. Well, they did to show other people, but they brought them back. So I'll put an image up, or 2 or 3 or 4 of the fish that I drew here, just off of my head, kind of fantasy fish. finish something just to pass the time with my rather dull pencil. And I spent some time doing that, and then I spent some time reading, and the whole time I spent with my underwear sticking out. And it wasn't that bad of a time. I mean, it was pretty bad because you're stuck in the hospital and you have to sleep on the bed like gurney and stuff like that, and it was frustrating, and you couldn't go anywhere, and you were just trapped in a room for 24 hours with absolutely no stimulation. Luckily for me, I had the paper and pencil, but other than that, in the book, there was nothing to do. But on the bright side, the very bright side, I can say I never got swamp ass, which was very good. And these paper scrubs, being paper, they absorb moisture. So I had to go to bed, I had to go to sleep with slightly moist top, because I had been pacing for so many hours that, you know, you sweat a little bit, the paper just soaks it up and then never dries. So that was extremely uncomfortable, but I did not suffer from swamp ass. I'm at least glad about that. Oh man. That experience reminded me a lot of another experience that I had when I was a sophomore in college. When I was a sophomore in college, I had declared my major already because you had to when you were a second semester freshman, so I had declared painting and drawing. And it was finals week for the first semester of my sophomore year. I was taking 3 studio classes, which were 5 hours long, and then 2 other GE classes. I think it was Art History 2 and like World Literature 1 or something like that. I don't remember exactly what classes I took. I just remember 3 of them were studios, 2 of them were not. And the 2 that were not were pretty easy. You just had to memorize stuff and then regurgitate it on a piece of paper to prove that you were listening or whatever. But the studio ones were hard because you had 3 weeks to do 1 project for each class. And the idea was that you would spend 5 hours in class in those studios, and then you would spend 10 hours out of class for every 5 hours you spent in class. So the final projects for these all 3 classes, you had to spend 30 hours on each project. I know. Kind of intense. Their curriculum was kind of intense, their art school that I went to. And I can talk more about that too if you want. Just let me know. But for now, we're going to stick to this one final project that I was working on. It was for a painting class. And I wish I could remember what the painting class was called. I don't remember really what it was called. So I'll just tell you about the project. I had decided to make a painting that weighed 100 pounds for this painting class. And to do so, I had decided to use latex paint. So I got the frame. I made the frame out of wood, put the support beams in, and then I went to Home Depot, and then this is where I first messed up. I got a cheap canvas drop cloth that I stretched over my wooden frame and stapled, and then started pouring copious gallons of latex white paint onto. And I'd stuff stuff into the paint, and I'd pour over the paint to make textures and whatnot, and I'd let the paint drip over the sides, and pretty much anything to make it 100 pounds. I had a lot of white latex paint in my studio for weeks, and it smelled so bad. Now, because I used a cheap drop cloth, I started to experience some problems, some weight problems. The canvas wasn't strong enough to hold that much, so I needed to start putting something on the back of the canvas to keep the canvas from ripping straight through and having all the paint just drop down the middle of it. I had decided to use carpet because I thought carpet would be nice and strong. So I had this carpet that I was attaching to the back of the canvas, and I was using epoxy glue. Now, epoxy glue is resin mixed with an adhesive, I think. It usually comes in like these 2, how to describe it? I'll put a picture up, but one side's resin, one side's the other, whatever that is, and you squeeze the bottom and then it mixes together because you want them to mix together, and then that's when it becomes a glue and then hardens. You have to have them on 2 separate containers because if you put them in one container, it'll just harden right away. Epoxy's kind of interesting that way. Epoxy also smells like really old farts, so I'm gluing this carpet onto the back of this painting that's covered in latex paint, which smells, using glue, which smells even worse. So my studio mates were very unhappy with me for a few weeks. Also, when I was pouring more paint on, not only was the canvas proving to not be very strong, but the wood that I had stretched the canvas on was also starting to bend, and some of the supports were starting to snap. So in desperation, I started to screw on more pieces of wood onto the back in an attempt to keep it from just cracking and everything going to shit. shit because it was the final week. This project was due so soon and I was struggling to get it done in time. I was struggling to get all 3 of my studio finals done in time, but this one was immensely difficult. I ran out of screws and I became desperate, so I started epoxying wood to the canvas on the back of this painting, which I don't think actually ever turned out to be 100 pounds, but it was heavy enough that I couldn't lift it or move it myself. So it had to have been above 50 or maybe even 60 pounds. Enough that I was willing to lie and say that it weighed 100 pounds. And so I have this giant monster of a painting, and it was a big painting too. It was at least 4 by 5 feet or 3 by 5 feet. It was just giant. And I had it sitting on the desk in the middle of the studio. Also at this time, because I was so frantic to get that project as well as my other projects done, I was sleeping in my studio, which wasn't really a problem because the roommates that I had at the time were partiers and they were also a year younger than I was, so they didn't have such extreme finals as I did, and I found them to be rather annoying and childish, so I spent as much time away from my dorm as I could. So sleeping underneath my desk wasn't a bad thing, except for that the ground was concrete and the space was 2 by 3 feet. So I'd curl underneath my desk and hide and try to sleep, maybe get 2 or 3 hours of sleep before I'd wake up and have to start work again. And you had to hide because you weren't allowed to sleep in your studio spaces. The security guards, if they found you, they'd wake you up and they'd force you to go back to your dorm. So I'd be hiding underneath my desk and I'd hear them walk about and hold my breath, and they never caught me over those weeks. But on that final week, I was so tired. I was so exhausted with this painting that was just falling apart, glue everywhere, that I just curled up into a ball in the middle of my studio, grabbed my pillow, grabbed my blanket, and took a nap. And no one woke me up, which was miraculous. So I slept about 4 hours, and I had been slightly sleeping underneath this painting without knowing it. So I got up and I saw that I was underneath the painting, and I was like, well, shit, I guess I'll have paint on my shirt or something. That sucks. So I took off the blanket and I looked at the blanket. There wasn't any paint on it, so I was like, oh, that's good. There wasn't any paint on my clothes, and I was like, oh, that's very good and very unexpected. Nice. Thank you, fate, for helping me with that. And I get up and I try to stand up, and I can't. I can't stand up. I can't move my ass off the concrete. And I wiggle, and I jiggle, and I do the little shimmy, but I was stuck, and I started to panic. I was thinking, oh my god, what? My brain wasn't working. I was just stuck to the ground with no idea why. And I was flailing my arms, and it was 4 a.m., and there was absolutely nobody around. I was like, well, shit, something's wrong. Something's really wrong here. I need to get up. I'll just use scissors and cut myself out of my pants or something. But the scissors was about 1.5 inches away from my outstretched hand, and I couldn't get close enough to it to grab it. And I called out for help. Absolutely nobody. I'm the only person on the entire floor. Called out a lot of times. So either no one was listening, had headphones in, or no one was there. So I only had one thing I could do. I unbuckled my belt and I started to awkwardly shimmy out of my pants. And luckily, whatever was keeping me to the ground only kept my pants to the ground, not my underwear, because that would have been very upsetting. So I was just standing there in my underwear, looking down at my poor pair of pants that are just stuck to the ground. And that's when I noticed the line of epoxy. I had fallen asleep on a big glob of epoxy that had dripped down from the canvas, and I hadn't noticed. And in those 4 hours of sleeping, the epoxy had hardened and settled and glued my butt to the concrete permanently. And then I get a new panic, thinking, oh my gosh, now my pants are stuck and I'm standing here in my underwear at 4 a.m. in my college on the 3rd floor. What am I gonna do? And so I tried pulling and I tried pulling and I tried pulling on these pants and pushing and shaking, and there was no way. It was not coming off. I grabbed a palette knife, I grabbed a straight razor, tried to chip it all off. It was no use. So I said, okay, fine, I'll just cut that part of the pants off with the scissors I was trying to reach, put my pants on, and get back to my dorm. But my brain was going 10 miles per hour and was just like, okay, we're gonna cut it, we're gonna cover it, we're gonna be good. So I grabbed the scissors and I try to start hacking at these pants, but the scissors are so dull that I can't get through the denim. And I'm trying, and I can feel tears in my eyes, and finally I just had to stop, give up, and think to myself, well, fuck, now what? Because there was no way that I was getting those pants off of that ground. That concrete has owned those pants, they have become one, and they shall never be separated again. So I had to do the only thing that I could do. I grabbed my bag and my keys, and I started sprinting. I sprinted across the whole 3rd floor, down 3 flights of steps, and down the back door where the security officers weren't standing. They usually had like a student officer that was standing there, but they were thankfully not there. They must have gone to the bathroom or something. But I go sprinting out the door at 4 a.m. and I have to sprint all the way across my campus because my dorm was the farthest dorm away. And I'm running for my life, just praying to any deity of your choice. Oh my God. Oh, please let nobody be standing outside smoking. Let nobody be looking out their window. Let nobody have their camera phone on them. Please, for the love of anything. And I was so distraught. I was like, it's too late now. The security cameras have me, but please let no students find me like this. So I'm sprinting and it takes me about a minute, 2 minutes to get across this campus, running as fast as I can because it's so far away. And I run to the door and I drop my keys and I drop my keys again. And I finally get in and I sprint to my dorm room. Luckily it was on the 1st floor. I open up the dorm and I sprint inside hoping that my roommates are asleep or too drunk or whatever. Luckily they weren't there. They must have gone out partying again. So I was home alone. Thank the stars. I was the only one there. And I ran into my room and I flopped on my bed just panting and praying, please let nobody have seen me without my pants, running across campus, running through the school. Please let nobody have seen me. Oh my gosh. I was so embarrassed. I think it's one of the most embarrassing things that I've ever had to do in my life, was to run around in my underwear at my art school at 4 in the morning. And I did not go back to my studio the next day or the day after that because I was just so mortified of studio mates asking me why it is I had a pair of pants glued to the ground. Well, nobody asked, and over time I was able to tell my friends what had happened because it had become somewhat of a funny story to me because they had asked me how I had done well on my finals, and so I told them about the story and it was pretty funny and telling it to them was hilarious. And a few days went by and I go to my studio and there's balloons and there's pairs of pants and the butts cut out of pairs of pants that all say, "Here's a spare pair." My friends had dressed up my studio in pants and balloons, telling me that now I had a spare pair of pants in my studio. It was my birthday, so that was my birthday gift, was a couple pairs of spare pants, and I'm pretty sure I took a photo of the studio space. I will try to find it and put it here, but for the rest of my school existence, every year on my birthday, they always ask, would you like a spare pair? And every once in a while, a random pair of pants would show up in my studio space, and yeah, that was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. And I hope that you guys found that funny too. So, being assless chaps in the ER is not the first time that I'd pretty much just gone commando in public. And knowing my luck, it will not be the last time I go commando in public. Hoping that it is the last time. But you never know. So, for all of you listening and watching out there, all I can say is, just make sure that you have a spare pair. Because you never know when you're gonna need it.